Well, welcome again, everyone, to this EPRC webinar in our autumn series. My name is John Bachtrögler, and I'm a professor here at EPRC. Today, we're delighted to welcome Dr. Julia Bachtrögler-Unger from the Austrian Institute of Economic Research, who's going to be talking about the role of administrative capacity for effective implementation of EU cohesion policy. We anticipate that Julia's presentation will be for about 30 minutes, and then we'll open things up for discussion. Usual rules of engagement: if you'd like to make an intervention, please just use the raise hand function, or feel free also to post a question in the chat, and we'll address these in the course of the discussion. I should say that the webinar is being recorded, which means that you or your colleagues have the opportunity to follow the meeting at a later stage, and the recording will be made available on our YouTube channel and shared by email. And do feel free to share your thoughts on social media. Let me just say a few words about our speaker. Julia is an economist at WIFO and has been working in the research group on regional economics and spatial analysis for a number of years. Her research, which I'm sure many of you have followed, focuses on issues of regional and urban economics. She's working as a project lead, a collaborator in a range of international projects. She's done a lot of really interesting work on the analysis of EU cohesion policy at a variety of spatial scales. And Julie's also got a range of teaching and researcher responsibilities, both in Vienna and elsewhere at Milan. Her work has been published in journals such as Regional Studies, and she's had a range of accolades and prizes for her work. So a great speaker for us today, and let me then hand over to Julia. Julia, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, John. So thank you very much for having me. I will quickly share my screen and hope you see my slides now. And now it should be in the right presentation mode, correct? Perfect.
Looks good.
Yeah, so thank you very much for having me. So I'm working on the evaluation of cohesion policy since several years now, starting with my PhD. And I always worked a lot also with what happens on the ground. So what are the projects actually funded? I've been involved a lot in that. And what I present today is somehow sort of not my main methodology, I would say. So it's not an empirical analysis I present today, but it is a reflection paper on the role of administrative capacity for an effective implementation of cohesion policy. So the aim of this paper was to reflect the literature and also data, if available, on that somehow shows or analyzes the influence of administrative capacity on the absorption and also on the effective use of cohesion policy funds. The paper is already 1.5 years old, so I was on maternity leave since not since then. I mean, I'm back several months now, but I think the paper has not lost some relevance, and I'm really also very much looking forward to this discussion with you. For example, also John, who is very much an expert on this topic. I structured this reflection paper and also this presentation in the following way. So I start with analysis on the relationship between the administrative capacity and the absorption of cohesion policy funds. So This is one important measure, but it's not all. So I will lay also a focus on the role of administrative capacity for the actual effective use of the funds, not only in terms of amounts spent, but also in how it is spent. And in this respect, I will also mention some more recent studies I did together with co-authors, where we really had a look how ERDF funding in the area of research innovation is spent in line with, for example, smart specialization priorities. And because I think that administrative capacity is also needed to achieve this. In this context, I will also maybe point to some potentials that require administrative capacity, namely increasing the opportunities of EU regions to develop green and digital technologies. That was also a study we did through interregional cross-border cooperation. So this should also be somehow a case showing why we need administrative capacity for the effective use of cohesion policy funds. And finally, I will conclude with some recommendations I have done in this reflection paper. Yeah. Good. As an introduction, maybe when I talk about administrative capacity, I mean the capacity of managing authorities mainly. I mean, this is, I guess, not exclusively, but it's the capacity of the authorities in a region, in particular these managing authorities of operational programs, to efficiently administer and effectively distribute the cohesion policy funds allocated to a region. And as I said, I see also two dimensions here. The one is really the personnel, which is practically required to administer and administer the funding, plus the governance system, so also the multi-level governance system, and is required a good one to effectively also implement the partnership principle and so on and so forth. I will not focus on that too much in this presentation. But the second part, next to well-qualified personnel and this governance, is that succeeded and effective use of the funds in terms of good place-based policy, so to say, with a good impact in the region, is likely to be driven by the engagement and the in-depth knowledge of the personnel. So qualification is not enough. And this is also necessary to ensure the stakeholder dialogue, coordination with other funding agencies within the country, across borders, and so on and so forth. So it's personnel and governance, but more that also really the engagement and in-depth knowledge of administrative personnel. And when I talk about what the effective user of the funds, what is effective, I already mentioned, it's not only the absorption of funds, so that cannot be the only target of administrations, but it's the good project implementation, good project selection, considering local regional strategies, challenges, regional specificities, and also the capabilities, for example, in terms of technological skills or knowledge. Good. Administrative capacity is needed along the investment cycle. So this is a figure taken from an OECD report. So we need administrative capacity also in the context of cohesion policy when planning happens. So the planning of operational programs, priority setting, need assessment, and so on and so forth. We need it for the design of interventions, then also of projects. We need it for investment implementation, meaning really the preparation of calls for projects and then the selection of projects. And we also need it in the monitoring and evaluation, and importantly, for learning from that for the next period, so to say, for the next planning phase. Now focusing first on this absorption element. So absorption obviously is needed, so the cohesion policy funds need to be called, meaning that applications of beneficiaries must be gathered, so to say. So there are calls for projects in many cases. Project selection comes in, and there need to be projects that the cohesion policy can be implemented. So the absorption is one element. We need projects to be funded. If we have a look at the absorption rate of the cohesion policy programming period 14 to 20, we see that by 2023, 96% of the planned funding, I mean, it's total cost here, has been spent. We see also, the cumulative involvement of this spending, and maybe also interesting up to June 2023, so half a year earlier than as calculated here, only 84% of the spending of the planned cost have been spent. So we have seen also a delay in the implementation. I will come to this. I'll talk about this more in a second. But if also maybe as a descriptive finding, if we have a look at the absorption rate per member state, we see that many regions have spent or overspent their planned cost. Maybe a note on this. So why can it be that more than 100% of planned costs are actually spent? I put a note here. The DG Regio provides some also more detailed explanations on this. So there have been shifts of funding between funding priorities that is not adequately corrected in this financial implementation data. And this came especially with the COVID crisis, the implementation of some flexibility measures, React EU as additional priority, and so on and so forth. And I also seen the information that this will be corrected. Corrected final measures will be available 2025 to 2026. So, but that's just for explanation. I mean, the majority of countries have spent their planned cost. What maybe strikes out or what is here, Spain and Ireland, and maybe also Italy, who have spent only 70 to 80% of their planned cost. But yeah, maybe we should not. We should wait for the final numbers to assess here the country differences in detail. But in general, I guess challenges to the absorption of cohesion policy funds that are discussed in the literature are the following. So, I mean, every cohesion policy project needs to be co-funded, so the lack of national co-funding could be a major issue, and it was a major issue in the 2007 to 13 programming period with the crisis and so on and so forth. Now, I guess in the literature, it's more what is more discussed is this complexity and administrative effort, or there could be also lack of appropriate applications by appropriate beneficiaries. And maybe linked to that, I mean, now in this period, the introduction of the Recovery and Resilience Fund may have been an issue with similar targets and a restricted timeline. So this may have led to the delay of cohesion policy implementation. And not only in this period, because also the programming and implementation of the 2021 and to 2027 period may have been delayed by that, and also, of course, the other challenges through COVID and so on and so forth. And yeah, this is just a graph on the 21-27 period where we see that implementation of cohesion policy progresses, but quite slowly. So by now, 50% of the planned cost is programmed. I will not go into too much detail on this. There's a literature review in the paper where I analyze the factors, found which elements of administrative capacity affect the absorption. So, for example, Mendes and Bachtrögler find recently that the higher quality of government, and part of that also managing authority performance, leads to a better absorption. But they also find a trade-off absorption versus outcome orientation in regions with relatively low administrative capacity, for example. And in general, I would summarize it, not surprisingly, good administrative capacity, qualified staff, good monitoring possibilities, higher quality, etc., leads to better absorption, reduces also corrections, financial corrections necessary if something was not implemented in a proper way. Yeah. But as said before, so we have factors that enhance absorption, but absorption is not all. So studies like from Becker, Egger et al. Find that more funding absorbed does not always mean more successful policy implementation in terms of, for example, achievement of economic growth or employment. Also, Di Caro and Fratesi find this recently. Also, there is this already mentioned trade-off between absorption and outcome orientation. So only absorption can lead to maybe not that effective implementation in terms of outcome orientation. And also studies find that short-term solutions to increase the absorption, so the are not optimal because they do not solve the structural problems and lead to ineffective use of cohesion policy funds. And this could happen because of fear of being perceived as political failure and so on and so forth. And in this context also, these short-term solutions are more focused on than, for example, increasing or enhancing on technical assistance, on the capabilities of public authorities and efficient public administration. And this can also be seen, this is my last absorption figure, in a relatively low absorption of cohesion policy funds aimed at technical assistance. So that's here the bar almost below, and also for efficient public administration. Good. I already, that's maybe also to summarize what has already been said. So in addition to the absorption, we should look at compliance with EU and national regulations in the implementation of cohesion policy. We should look at the achievement of outcome targets, and this this should be additional indicators when we come to assess administrative performance. This is what also Mendes and Bachtrögler find. We know also from literature that the effect of the same euro dedicated to a thematic area in different types of regions is not the same. So setting the right priorities, selecting the right projects is essential. And also in a study with Fratesi and Perotta, I find that administrative efficiency and citizen engagement are positively correlated with the effects of cohesion policy. We know from the literature that institutional quality, and as part of that, the quality of administration, is one element of the absorptive capacity of a region, together with human capital. We know that regional characteristics play a role or shape the effects of cohesion policy implementation in different types of regions. We know that the thematic orientation has different effects per se. And we also know that, or it's maybe also more a strategy, that cohesion implementation, cohesion policy implementation should be in line with local strategies, such as smart specialization strategies in the field of research and innovation, meaning we should set good priorities, streamline the funding towards these priorities. So knowing all that, that really makes very clear that we need motivated, qualified, and experienced administrative staff in addition to sufficient human resources for effective cohesion policy implementation. And as also already said, this is also required for getting the stakeholder involvement in a sufficient way, interactions with potential beneficiaries, coordination and communication. So having said that, let me quickly, mention 3 examples where from also recent studies which somehow motivate this requirement of in-depth knowledge and engagement of administrative personnel. The European Commission encourages the distribution of R&I funding. So now I focus on this R&I aspect, TO1, thematic objective 1, in line with certain aspects. So in addition now to this place, or let me go through. So the first one is the place-based aspect. So in line with the smart specialization principles, the European Commission or the regulations of cohesion policy require regions to prioritize technologies, prioritize industries, and also policy objectives that are of relevance for their regions, given its specificities and capabilities. And then, of course, next to this priority setting, also the R&I funding and project selection should be in line with that. By the way, when I talk of R&I, this is mainly now the ERDF. Yeah. So then, next to this place-based requirement. It's also an ex-ante conditionality. The European Commission sets strategic targets, maybe if you want like a top-down. So, for example, the focus on the green transition, the digital transition, and so on and so forth. And that's also something the regions have to keep in mind and have to and know best maybe what their region can contribute to achieving these targets. And as another topic, maybe the European Commission also encourages synergies between the ERDF and Horizon funding, now specifically in the context of R&I, but it has encouraged synergies also with other funding instruments in order to achieve a critical mass of funding targeted at strategic priorities. So, and also this requires administrative capacity, in my view. We've also had a recent analysis on this, but on this I won't focus in this presentation. Good. Regarding the smart specialization priorities, there has been critique in the literature that smart specialization strategies and priorities are defined too broadly, meaning that really a large set of the, for example, grand societal challenges which could be selected were actually prioritized in many regions. And there's also been the finding that smart specialization strategies of certain regions mimic those of neighboring regions. Maybe the good news is we have analyzed how the S3 priorities now correlate with actual R&I funding. And we have found for a subset of the projects that the large majority of actual projects is in line with S3 priorities. I mean, this is the first good news. However, I also need to say this, I think this is also related maybe to administrative capacity or a challenge. Around 25% of the ERDF R&I projects in their description, so this is also the legal requirement of providing these lists of operations, they do not provide sufficient detail to classify them. So maybe also this points to this monitoring and aspect. So we need good information, and I think that also administrative capacity should be reserved for that. So the first point was the good news. So large majority of RNI projects is in line with the 3 priorities. And the good news in terms of selectivity, because as I said, 3 priorities are often quite broad. Actual R&I funding is even more, is better targeted and better specified in terms also of the regional capabilities than as 3 priorities. And this is maybe also not too surprising, because when it comes to actual implementation of projects, then you need the actors on the ground in the region. And there's more, this issue of unselective S3 strategies seems to some extent be mitigated in the translation from priority selection to actual funding decisions. But I think this is a major effort that the administrative personnel also needs to coordinate. I also put this as an example. I mean, when it comes to achieving top-down strategic targets like the green and digital transition, we see that this is now split by types of regions. Over here we have a diagram showing the potential for more developed regions to develop green and digital technologies. The blue ones are digital technologies, the green ones are green technologies. And here on the x-axis, you have the relatedness, meaning if you have higher relatedness, this means you have higher capabilities, pre-existing knowledge to develop on these technologies here. And the complexity on the y-axis means the higher the complexity, the higher are also the expected economic returns. And okay, one general figure, one general finding in these graphs is that green technologies are less complex, but we still need to develop them. The digital technologies are more complex, and we see that maybe as expected, the more developed regions have better capabilities in developing these digital technologies. But, and this now I come to my point, also less developed regions have capabilities in, especially here, developing green technologies, which we also need to achieve the green transition. And this is maybe an opportunity for less developed regions. And so this is one finding. The other finding was based on that analysis, we did complementarity maps, mapping the complementarity of capabilities of pre-existing knowledge in the various EU regions. And we find that, here's an example for Arnsberg, a German region for the development of hydrogen, that it has complementary capabilities with, for example, several French regions, also Swedish ones, and also a Polish one. And we see this for most regions and technologies. So you have potential partner regions with complementary skills, but the large majority of patent collaborations that currently are there are within countries. So in this study, we have seen a high untapped potential on working together to develop further on green and digital technologies and achieving this green digital transition. And I think that to achieve this interregional collaboration, capacity for managing authorities is required. But also the European Commission has introduced partnerships for innovation that should foster this. And I think that also more and more data is available, showing the atlas of capabilities in EU regions. And I think this should also be a central tool for managing authorities to program and to implement cohesion policy. Good. I will conclude now with the recommendations I have set in this reflection paper. They are structured in the sequence of also my presentation. So the first recommendation, or first two recommendations, were on this absorption issue. and particularly on this potential or likely issue in the interaction with the RRF that has financed similar priorities and has potentially or in partly also led to additional efforts for managing authorities, which resulted in, if they were the same, if they had also the responsibility for the RRF, which was the case, I think, in several countries. And this has led to this delay of cohesion policy implementation. And furthermore, and I think this is also very important, the consequences in terms of delays on the implementation of also the 21 to 27 cohesion policy should be taken into account for monitoring and evaluation and should be addressed soon, because this will have, I think, major implications for the evaluation of cohesion policy in this period. And one idea maybe was that maybe one should reflect on measures to increase the flexibility in using cohesion policy funds in order to avoid these incentives to spend the money at the end of the programming period in rush and therefore perhaps ineffectively. So potentially granting the possibility of rolling over cohesion policy funding to the next program period could be an option. Then I come to recommendations in the context of administrative capacity, specifically personnel availability. So given the importance of well-qualified and motivated staff in the managing authorities, it should be ensured that sufficient financial resources are available. And better salaries and career options, as well as an attractive working environment, could, I think, are essential to gather this really also motivated and engaged staff. And I think also, maybe when it comes to the discussion on the future MMF, also if the focus of prioritization and so on gets more national, maybe, I think it's important to have these people in the regions which know how to best contribute to the national and EU-wide targets. Another recommendation so if managing authorities in certain regions are understaffed, despite the availability of financial resources, one could consider the possibility of merging managing authorities or maybe using synergies in tasks, such as monitoring or stakeholder processes that could be exploited with, and by that ensuring also the place-based focus of the policy. So yeah, make use of administrative efficiency measures maybe. Good. Then regarding administrative capacity and effective use of funds, the use of cohesion policy funds for technical assistance and strengthening public administration should be prioritized. We've seen on this absorption rate figure that pots maybe are relatively little absorbed. I mean, in comparison to other priorities. And good programming and project selection depends on administrative capacity. My last recommendation was that in addition to the four or five previous recommendations, these information systems on regional capabilities, sectoral strengths, regional needs and opportunities for interregional cooperation should be improved and made accessible easily to administrative staff as well as potential beneficiaries. So I think that making use of this also now broad data availability could help in enhancing the effectiveness of cohesion policy implementation. Okay, thank you very much, and happy for your comments. Looking forward to your comments.
Hey, thank you very much, Julia. That was a really interesting presentation. So much in there, but of interest and that we could pick up on. Let me maybe let's open things up now for questions, and we'll pick up questions both from colleagues who raise their hand and any comments that are put in the chat. I just wanted to pick up on your second recommendation, which referred to the pressures on absorption. And I wondered whether we're maybe looking at too narrow an issue here. Mm-hmm. Because essentially, administrative capacity has been written about for 20 years or more. And essentially, it's saying a lot of much the same things now as we were saying in the 2000s. You know, issues of staffing, of systems, the pressures on different managing authorities in different parts of the EU, and what the reasons for that variation are. And essentially what we have is a very complex system that makes it difficult for some implementing bodies, managing authorities, intermediate bodies, and so on, to spend money on time, to meet the rules on regularity, and in terms of the outcome targets that they're meant to achieve. And then when they don't achieve it, we say, well, they're not very good. And what your recommendation 2 was pointing towards is, well, maybe we should be thinking differently about the rules that we have. And you know, you probably know the article that Annabella Santos, Andrea Conte, and Francesca Mollica wrote last year, where they said, you know, we need to actually have more flexibility, not just in terms of absorption, but in terms of thematic concentration and in terms of some of the other rules. And Michael Thüne has gone one stage further in his ZEW paper last year, that maybe we ought to be thinking about a different approach to supporting less developed regions with lower administrative capacity, more in the direction of financial transfers rather than this complex programming system. Now, it looks like that's going to have to change anyway as a result of the MF proposals. But I wondered if you'd like to sort of reflect a bit more on that, the direction that your recommendation 2 was going in, that we actually need to think of rethink the complexity of the rules rather than beating managing authorities over the head to say, you know, why aren't you able to meet these complex rules?
Exactly. No, thank you for the question. So my recommendation 2, that was the one on measures to increase flexibility and using the cohesion policy funds in order to avoid this incentive to spend the money in a rush. Just very well. Here I really meant this issue that we see now, that we have a delayed implementation in the program periods, and that we get this issue now again. I mean, in the 21 to 27 period, it will be even worse, I think. It looks like that. I think that here, that's the issue, I mean. So I think the European Commission should think about how this could be rolled over. So if not all money is spent by 2029, right, or 2030. I don't know if the N+3 rule is something. So there should not be a rush there. I think it would be good if there would be a mechanism that, given the delay in the implementation and programming, the money could still be used and does not need to be used now in a rush. That was my recommendation 2 only about. Regarding the more flexibility in targets and so on. Yeah, so I totally agree with you with the requirements and regulations are huge, and to meet all the regulatories, I think all administrative capacity is needed, and maybe there's not enough time. What I also presented, to have a look what would be the optimal use in the regions. I guess there's also maybe too little time on this, given also the all the regulatory and targets set. I totally agree. I mean, yeah, if we need more flexibility, targets and so on and so forth. I think that really what is crucial is this balance between this place-based aspect. So also what are the regional capabilities? What is the also most efficient use of funds in the period, in the region? And then these top-down strategic targets. I think finding this balance will be is an issue, and how flexible all the in-between, so to say, target and regulation should be, that should be discussed and thought about in detail. I totally agree.
Okay. Thank you, Julia. Let's open things up. Would anybody else like to make a comment or ask a question? We have quite a lot of experience, I can see, looking at the participants. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised.
I've seen a comment asking, what does the term "the same euro" mean?
Oh, yes, I see the chat. Yes,
yeah.
From Charlotte.
That was
sorry, that was from me. I'm not an economist, but I presume it means that the euro might have a different impact somewhere else between countries.
Exactly. So
Okay.
it was also one finding in one paper, for example, where we looked at a concrete measure, if you want, like that. So ERDF grants to manufacturing firms, and we found that also this similar policy had different effects in different types of regions, and there's a lot of literature also concluding the same. So yeah, we have different effects in terms of thematic orientation of funding, plus and interaction with the regional specificities. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying that, Julia. Other comments, questions? We've got a number of participants, I think, who've got practical experience, hands-on, with implementing European funding. Fabian Gall, Helena Henrik, any comments? Fabian, would you like to comment? You've both looked at this as an implementer and as a PhD researcher. Sorry, we're not hearing you, Fabian, or at least I'm not hearing you. Is anybody else hearing you?
I try again. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes. I was hesitating a bit because I'm in a co-working space, so I hope the sound gets through okay, and you can hear me okay. Yeah, as you mentioned, John, I just finishing up a PhD where I'm looking at the implementation of cohesion policy in the Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes region, and I've worked within the managing authority in the Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes region while doing this PhD research. And the research really is related in some respect to administrative capacity, but I'm taking an angle looking more at the administrative burden side and trying to explain how beneficiaries, why the beneficiaries perceive administrative burden during implementation. And during my research, what struck me in terms of administrative burden is that it is not only the administrative workload that beneficiaries are confronted with, but it is also an aspect of ambiguity, which is very important for beneficiaries in terms of why and how they perceive administrative burden. And I'm thinking, on the one hand, on the ambiguity of the objectives, which seem to be not sufficiently clear to beneficiaries. What is the intervention logic of EU funds, apart from distributing the money, which they're obviously grateful for, but what public dimension, what contribution EU cohesion policy is really making, and that territorial dimension and territorial development objective is not really perceived that much in cohesion among beneficiaries, and that's contributing to the administrative perception of administrative burden. And also in terms of the ambiguity of the rules, it is not clear to beneficiaries in how far or why certain rules apply to their project, while as if the same project could have been funded through domestic sources or through other EU programs. Horizon is a typical example. Why then another set of rules apply to beneficiaries? So it's this element of ambiguity, and it's related to the whole administrative capacity question. So I was wondering whether or what your reflections are on this issue, that the ambiguity is something that you've come across during your research as well, and what your thoughts on this aspect really were.
Okay. Thank you, Fabian.
Thank you. Very interesting. Yeah. I mean, I came across this issue also with the different objectives, the prioritization of objectives, and so on and so forth. Also, when it comes to the evaluation, right, of cohesion policy, because it's really very difficult. So we try then we use, for example, really this project level data, which somehow gives us a channel to get an overview of the different interventions aimed at different targets, because the targets, could be the different thematic objectives, but then you also have the green transition, digital transition, technological sovereignty, and so on and so forth. Right, so there are so many also more top-down or missions. Entering the scene, and I can only say that also from an evaluation point of view, that's really difficult. And we try to get this very systematic, and I think that can be the only way also to use this project level data, see how it affected more specific targets, and then to evaluate the policy mix and see what it meant to economic growth and these typical macro variables. Yeah, but it's this ambiguity is also a challenge in evaluation. And it's very interesting what you tell about the perception of managing authorities.
Okay. Thanks very much. Other questions, comments? Just a follow-up from what you've been saying, maybe a question both for yourself, Julia, and for yourself, Fabian. I mentioned that the MFF proposals on the future of the EU budget and the implications for cohesion policy, at least some of the issues, maybe many of the issues that arise with administrative capacity, they are related to the complexity of the, if you like, the sort of cost-based, expenditure-based system that we have at the moment. And I wonder to what extent you see that administration will be simplified, and therefore there'll be less pressure on administrative capacity and fewer problems in terms of absorption and irregularities from the introduction of a performance-based system. Similar to the RF. Of course, the RF doesn't have a clean bill of health, as we know from the European Court of Auditors, but I wonder whether you both have any thoughts on that. So, Julia first, maybe?
I should start, yeah. I mean, so I'm no expert on the performance-based system in details. I don't know the details, but I know from the RF experience is that there's very little data available on what was actually funded. So, for example, from the data side, I mean, that should be, I think, much more improved. And maybe what it means for managing authorities, I can imagine that it would be also very hard to measure these performance-based aspects. But maybe Fabian, you have a better insights.
Thanks, Julian. Fabienne, any thoughts?
Yeah, but it's mainly personal reflections after I've looked at the proposals, and I'm not really focused on that ambiguity question, because that's a result of my my research. And looking at the proposals, I don't really see an improvement in terms of ambiguity and the perception that beneficiaries will probably have towards the implementation of cohesion policy. I mean, only the fact that there is now ERDF, which is half abolished, merged into the new fund with an incredibly long name, but then the ERDF still exists as kind of an annex because it's in the treaties. So there's one aspect which to me creates more ambiguity rather than having less of it. In terms of the delivery mode, moving away from cost-based and more towards performance-based, I get the impression that in the implementation phase and the practical workings of cohesion policy would maybe be simplification for the Commission, but I'm not really sure that that simplification would trickle down all the way to the beneficiaries, because we've got still financial regulation that needs to be respected, and the conformity and regularity of spending still needs to be verified. So I'm afraid that despite the announcement of a shift towards a performance-based implementation at the operational level, we still have all the financial and regulatory checks that need to be done at the managing authority level. And on top of that, we have the additional indicators that the performance-based management requires. So, well, we'll see how it'll turn out, but my first impression would be that it's rather an add-on, adding to complexity rather than simplifying implementation.
Okay, that's quite a sober assessment then.
Sorry.
No, any other comments that anybody has from our participants on either new questions or supplements to what we've been just discussing? Just something else that struck me while you were talking, Julia, is the degree to which administrative capacity is improving over time. The problem we have, of course, is that we've had this layering of regulatory requirements in every program period. So there are always new challenges for implementation and for administrative capacity. And you touched on smart specialization, for example, which is a major challenge for managing authority, and not just managing authorities, the whole ecosystem of implementation. But a question is, are we getting our MAs and other bodies getting better? One would hope so, one would think so, with the investment that the Commission is making and has made in administrative capacity. What's your own sense, Julia?
So what you know much better also the practical side, but I mean, now I again mentioned this data stuff, because really I think that having now this, I think there has come out also a new guide on regional capabilities and so on and so forth. So I think in this field of R&I and for smart specialization, it may get easy as the question, but I mean, I don't know if more information always leads also to simplification or if it leads to new challenges, but I think that the information bases get better, and maybe also I mean, I think there are also there are also initiatives by the Commission that, or also by you, that that organize this interaction between regions, maybe with similar challenges of similar type. And I think this learning from each other and best practices and comparing also one region with others, that could maybe lead to more opportunities. But also, I don't know what if that makes it easier or simpler or opens new challenges. Yeah. That's...
Okay. No, it's an interesting question because you look at the latest irregularity data, and it sort of went consistently down for about a decade from when the Commission started to pay more attention to financial control, but the latest data shows it going up again.
Okay.
And the question is that because the system's getting more complex, the checks are getting more rigorous, although the ECA would disagree with that. They think the control systems are still not very good. Yeah. Or is it just because the types of projects that are being assisted or supported are more difficult and risky? So, I mean, that's just using the irregularity measure. But yeah, I think it's a question for an interesting research question. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, we're coming up to the hour. Are there any other comments or questions that anybody has before we draw things to a close? No. Any final points you'd like to make, Julia?
Not really. So I think that's all. Now maybe also when thinking about the discussions for the future MMF, yeah. I think I've said it before, but I think even if we come to less focus on regional and place-based objectives or strategies, I think that saving this element also for efficient use of money also been spent by or organized by national bodies is essential. So I think that's maybe one thing to state in the end.
Okay. Well, that's a good note to finish on. Julia, thank you very much. Really interesting presentation. And we've started to open up I think some really interesting points also in the discussion. And thank you everyone for your interest in the webinar today. Just to draw attention to our next webinar of the autumn semester will be on the 15th of October, with Dr. Gareth Mace. He's from the Food and Agriculture Organization, but will be known to a number of us as a former PhD student in EPRC. And he'll be presenting on research from his PhD thesis with the question, does participatory budgeting improve local democracy? So please do contact us to register for our mailing list if you're not already on it, and to keep up to date on future events. And we hope to see you at one of our future webinars. Thank you, Julia. Thank you all. Have a good day. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.